who's been saying things for 20 years, and when he says something, science a couple years later backs it up, is James Hansen. So I'm betting on James Hansen's, what he says is his timeline. So here's the roadmap. We need to get down to 350 parts per million for atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. If you're at all familiar with those numbers, you know that we are currently at 385. That means, folks, that we need to not only stop emissions, we need to not only reduce emissions, we need to not only reduce the growth of emissions, we need to reduce the emissions, we need to stop emissions, and we need to reverse the emissions. We need to go to a net zero carbon economy and carbon sequestration so that we can draw these levels back down from 385 to 350. Hansen says that if you keep us at 450 parts per million, which is what the current EU targets are all based on, this was his work, 450. He said 450. The EU said, okay, let's go for that. He did some more research and said, actually, if we stay at this, he said our most ambitious target is a guaranteed disaster. That's why the game is much later than we think. That's why I think it's much later than we've thought. Because we need to go farther than we did, quicker than we did, and his targets for this, we need to shoot for 350 parts per million, which I am convinced will go down in history known as humanity's number. It will define whether our civilization endures or whether it collapses. How we do that is we eliminate all coal-fired power plants by 2030, which means we must cut them in half. We must close half. By 2020. So there's your next 10 years, 12 years. Close half of all coal-fired power plants, which means we need to ban new ones now. Which means we need to change policies in the next 1 to 2 years. That's remarkably ambitious. That's breathtaking. That's ridiculous. It seems impossible. But being one person who's reached 7 million, I've got a way to propose that it's not impossible. Because 7 million times 500 is 3.5 billion. So, what do we do with this? The only way to get policy decisions in the next 1 to 2 years, the game is so different, we can't afford to ask people to change their light bulbs and bike to work and buy a hybrid car. That was the old game. The game is different. We cannot address this doing things the way we did things before, with campaigns and personal actions. We need to have a significant change, a complete paradigm change in how social and political change happens. What we need is what the author Malcolm Gladwell calls a social epidemic. We need an economic and social mobilization on par with what the U.S. did in World War II after being bombed in Pearl Harbor. In 4 years, they went from a standing start to one of the most powerful economies in the world. That's the level we need, where every person every day wakes up saying, after my faith and my family, this is the most important thing I can do. In fact, I think we should declare World War III.